Hello, and welcome to the Basic IT Security Awareness course for Wayne State University. My name's Kevin Hayes, and I'm the Information Security Officer at CNIT, and I'm going to be your guide through this course. The mission of the Information Security Office is to create and foster a safe and secure computing environment for everyone associated with Wayne State University, students, faculty, employees, guests, and the community. This training session and your participation is a very important part of that. The purpose of this course is to give you a brief overview of the simple things that you can do here at Wayne State to keep your data, your computer, and ultimately you secure. While this session is geared towards Wayne State employees, many of the things covered are great for everyone to know. So let's get started. In today's session, I'm going to be covering 6 important topics. First, the need for IT security and why any of this even matters. Second, how to actually protect your data and that of your department so it does not get into the wrong hands. Third, safeguarding your credentials, particularly focused on your AccessID and those prickly passwords. Fourth, how to identify fraudulent or phishing emails, which is really important to prevent attacks before they begin. Fifth, I'm going to talk on how to prevent your computer from running bad or malicious software. And finally, you'll learn how to identify and report possible security incidents, so that if you notice anything amiss with your newfound knowledge, you'll know how to react. So let's get started on today's first topic, the need for IT security. So why does IT security or any of this content even matter to you? In short, it's really quite simple. You have things that attackers want. And what do I mean by that? Typically, attackers the world over are looking for 2 particular things. Number 1, they want your data, which, trust me, is very valuable, so that they can benefit financially somehow. And number 2, they want control of your computer so that they can launch additional attacks to try and penetrate even deeper into the organization and get at data that they could not previously. If you think about it, there's actually a treasure trove of information sitting all around you. The university has plenty of valuable things that any attacker would love to have. Things like financial records, unpublished research data, classified contract information, credit card information, social security numbers, grades, student records, library journals, advanced curricula, just to name some. In the wrong hands, the disclosure of any of this information could prove devastating to the university. We do not want that to happen. Even if you yourself do not have any of these things on your computer, you are surrounded by other computers, servers, and networks that do. Remember what I said about your computer being a launching point? Attackers know how to pivot from one computer to another, and by taking over your computer to get past some of our defenses, they can then continue to find other valuable information throughout the university. For each record or piece of personal information that attackers get access to, there's the unfortunate cost of dealing with all the consequences, from detecting the incident, to responding, to gathering evidence, hiring forensics experts, paying for credit monitoring, and that's not even mentioning the cost of any lost business or contracts as a result of the breach. In 2013, the average cost per stolen record was about $180 each. What that ends up meaning, though, is that if you have a sensitive Excel file with just 50 student records in it, and that ends up getting compromised, it's going to cost the university about $9,000 to deal with that aftermath. Now imagine this. Imagine a much larger file, like maybe a big database. You can see how this can quickly get out of control. To make matters even worse, there are laws in place that require the university to notify media outlets in the case of any kind of substantial hack or data breach. And for us here in Michigan, that's going to be the Identity Theft Protection Act of 2004. and that's going to require such of a notification. In the event of a breach, we actually have to send notification letters to our victims, no matter where they actually end up living. We also have to maintain a telephone number for victims to call if they have any questions regarding what happened during the breach. If any breaches involve more than 1,000 records, we actually have to report that back up to the federal government. And additionally, there's also mass media options if we ever have a breach where our responding cost is more than $250,000. Sadly, breaches in IT security are getting quite common. In just the last year, Target, Home Depot, and Neiman Marcus have had their entire U.S. store operations completely compromised by hackers. A few years ago, TJ Maxx almost declared bankruptcy due to succumbing to the exact same thing. JP Morgan Chase and the FBI are working as we speak to investigate a significant breach, as of right now involving over 83 million accounts. And in 2011, the online PlayStation Network, or PSN, was shut down for days due to attackers. Now, universities are no stranger to this realm. About once every single week, an institution of higher education is a victim and has to incur financial and reputational damages as a result. In the past year alone, there have been major breaches at the University of Maryland, the Indiana University, as well as the North Dakota University system, just to name a few. Oh, actually, there's another important organization that's been hit with data breaches in the past. Wayne State University. That's right, our own institution has had the unfortunate situation of dealing with data breaches. Thankfully, during the past several years, we've only had to deal with a couple of small incidents, with a small incident consisting of only a couple of dozen or so records that were disclosed. However, just because these breaches are small does not mean that they are not taken seriously. Full investigations occurred during each one of these breaches, and the breach notices that were sent out to the victims had to be signed not only by our CIO, but the vice president over the school, college, or division that owned the compromised computer. So in conclusion, there is a great need for IT security. Data breaches are serious things. They can happen here, as they have in the past. With Wayne State's current focus on keeping and growing enrollment, any sort of financial or reputational damage due to a breach of IT security would be devastating. Thankfully, with your help and your vigilance, we can all do our part to prevent that from happening. All right, next up, our second section for today, how to protect your data. Now that we have an understanding as to why we need to protect the university's data, we can really appreciate learning how to best protect it, because that's our end goal. Now, the first step to protecting your data and preventing breaches begins with identifying your data and what data and information your department is working on. I mean, you can't protect what you don't know. It's going to be a very good idea to have a discussion at least annually where you identify your data so you know exactly what kinds of information, what kinds of servers, what kinds of systems you need to safeguard. Now, if you're having a hard time coming up with this list or coming up with this inventory of what you're working on, you can actually just start asking yourself a couple of questions, in order to help get you started. What kinds of data are you asking for from students? How about from staff? What about from guests? Are you sending sensitive information between coworkers using the Wayne Connect email system? Are you transferring any data to outside parties or governmental entities as part of your job duties? Are you or your employees downloading and restoring reports from our reporting systems such as Cognos? And do the processes that you run only once a year during the year-end time, do those end up changing anything, or do you do anything special during that time that maybe you wouldn't be thinking about before? While we're looking to protect all the university's data, it is important to note that some data is more important than others. Wayne State University has a policy regarding the really important information that it has, and that would be our confidential information policy, policy 07-02. Now, a link to this can be found from the security homepage at security.wayne.edu if you would care to read it. Now, this policy has a basic definition of what confidential information is, and it basically states confidential information is data that could harm somebody if it were to be disclosed. We covered a lot of good examples of these things back in our introduction. While it's really important to identify where your confidential information is, please make sure that when you're doing your data inventory, you're not limiting it to just the sensitive or confidential information. It's going to be important for you to have a complete picture of what kinds of data flow through your office and through your desks on a daily basis. All right, now that you know the data that you and your office are working on, you can start to answer one question. One single question, which, without a doubt, is the most important thing you can ask yourself when it comes to IT security. Do I really need this? Hey, here's the beautiful thing. Attackers can't steal things that don't exist and that you don't have. I know we all love to be pack rats and keep a lot more data than we should, simply because we keep telling ourselves, well, we might need that file someday. Well, guess what? Attackers might want that too. And if you're either storing or handling any kind of sensitive information, it's going to be important that you either, number one, have an appropriate business case for why you actually need to have that data, or number two, are able to actually just regenerate that data in the future if it's needed. There's an easy and corny way actually to remember this. Just tell yourself, when in doubt, throw it out. You and your staff should be going through your desktop, your file shares, and your applications, and ideally purging out the data that you just don't need on at least an annual basis. All right, so at this point, not only have you identified your important data, but you've gotten rid of all that stuff that you don't need. Now, for everything that remains, your remaining data, we need to make sure that the most critical things of all, and usually this is going to be your confidential data, is encrypted so that it does not fall into the wrong hands. Windows computers that are managed by CNIT and the DeskTech department within CNIT have a feature called BitLocker on them. And what this does is completely encrypt the contents of your computer when it's turned off. And if your computer gets lost or stolen, it's absolutely impossible for the thieves to read the contents of any of your files. Additionally, Wayne State does not have to perform any breach notifications if you lose your device, as typically laws, especially the Michigan law, actually ends up exempting encrypted records. Now, it's important to note, BitLocker does not protect you from viruses or malware that are running on your computer. We'll be covering those aspects in just a little bit, so hold on. Staying on the topic of physical security, it's also going to be very important for you to keep your computer locked and any sensitive paper documents locked away in a file cabinet or other secure location. Why is this kind of security important? My desktop is my kingdom. Personally, I'm logged into so many things at the exact same time on my computer that if an unauthorized person could be at my computer for just 60 seconds, they could cause real havoc and damage to the university. Trust me, all it takes is a few moments for a disgruntled employee to either alter some records, send some fraudulent emails, exfiltrate some privileged documents, or install a keyboard sniffer on your computer so they could figure out what your passwords are. Now, some of this may sound a little bit far-fetched. I mean, do I really have to lock my computer every single time I get up to go to the bathroom or go visit the printer? And my answer to you is yes, for two very practical reasons. Number one, our offices and our workstations are typically in semi-public buildings, so you have no idea who may be wandering through at any given moment. And number two, I have personally lost count Oh, the number of times I've either been diverted or distracted or even grabbed for a meeting as I leave my desk, keeping me out of my office for sometimes hours at a time. And every moment you leave your computer alone and unlocked, you are creating a huge risk. Thankfully, locking your computer is really easy. For Windows computers, simply hold down the Windows key and push L for lock. I do it with one hand every single time I get up from my computer. And if you have a Mac, you can set up a password-protected screensaver and it'll come up when you just hold your mouse way over in one corner of the screen for a few seconds. Finally, I want to make sure that you're protecting your data by protecting the small, portable devices that we all carry around with us. Many times we don't think of them as having the same importance. I mean, these are our own personal devices, like our own personal cell phones, right? Well, they are. But the line between personal and work is so incredibly blurred today. I mean, as an example, my personal phone has my family pictures on it, but at the same time, it's also syncing up with all of my work email. So there's no easy way to end up keeping those two sides apart. The biggest area that we end up running into problems with is when our cell phones or our tablets or other mobile devices get lost or stolen. And attackers have toolkits, and using them, they can easily view files, view your email, and view all the other data on your smartphone just simply if they can get hold of it. Thankfully, there are some things that we can do to both reduce the risk as well as completely prevent data from getting into the wrong hands if we misplace our portable devices. First, you should use a passcode or a fingerprint ID on your device and require it for every single use. A locked device makes it a couple of orders of magnitude harder for attackers to access your data. I know the newer Apple phones have a great feature called Touch ID, and if you don't have that set up, you should do that immediately. Second, set up your device to actually just lock automatically, so that if your phone is inactive for a minute or so, make it automatically go to sleep, blank the screen, and then require that passcode or that fingerprint in order to work again. Third, do not root or jailbreak your phone. And this refers to making unauthorized changes to your phone in an effort to get around some manufacturer restrictions. This rooting typically has you running some unknown or unauthorized program on your phone, and doing that places your data in great jeopardy. Finally, enable remote tracking and remote wipe features if at all possible. Apple has their Find My iPhone service, which works well, funnily enough, with all Apple devices, not just iPhones. And there's also Android apps that can do the exact same thing. In the event that your device gets lost or stolen, you can just pull up a map of where your device was last located to help law enforcement recover your phone. For some extra safety, you can even then send a kill command to your phone to remotely wipe all of your data off of it to make sure the thief gets nothing. Wow, well, we covered a lot. So to conclude this section, properly protecting your data is going to be critical to keeping both you and the university secure. And there are 5 things that you can do to accomplish this. You can keep an accurate inventory of the data being used by you and your department. You can delete and get rid of data that you just don't need and realistically you can just live without. You can encrypt the sensitive information that you just can't get rid of, that you will still just end up needing. You can lock your computer and your work area when you are not physically present. And you can be vigilant with your own personal devices, such as laptops, tablets, and smartphones. All right, on to our third topic in today's session, how to deal with those pesky passwords and safeguard your credentials. Keeping credentials and managing passwords is a painful process. It's painful to you because it's an annoyance to keep track of everything, and it's painful to me because I get to watch the self-imposed train wreck of security happen. I mean, just personally, I have to frequently deal with the accounts for my bank, my credit cards, my utilities, and my retirement account. Let's throw in my accounts for eBay, Amazon, and why not my PayPal that I use once every few years. I have a couple old and few current accounts used for online gaming. My Apple ID is supposedly needed on all of my iDevices for them to magically talk to each other. I have my accounts for my IT security industry and certification groups. And finally, all of the countless accounts I've signed up for sometime in my ever-growing lifetime. I can't count them all, and yet I'm supposed to manage them all? It sounds like a Herculean task. There are some things that we can do to overcome this challenge and make it a more easy and manageable process. Before I get there though, I want to make sure everyone was aware of the restrictions and requirements for your accounts here at Wayne State, specifically your AccessID. Your AccessID is your gateway into pretty much all things Wayne State, from your email to submitting timesheets and grades, from purchasing things in WayneBuy to creating travel arrangements, from accessing the data on your desktop to your departmental file share. Your Access ID is a huge deal. So we want to make sure that your password is relatively secure and cannot easily be guessed. We just spent a good amount of time talking about securing our data. So let's not leave the front door wide open by having a terrible password in front of it all. CNIT has created a strong password standard to help us out with keeping our accounts secure, and it lays out certain things that you need to do when creating your password here at Wayne State. Number one, you have to have a minimum of 8 characters in your password. Take it from me, a security guy. It is very easy to brute force small passwords. You really don't want anything less than 8 characters. Number two, you have to have at least one uppercase character, one lowercase character, and a numeral. Special characters aren't required, but I would recommend them. Now, having these characters in your password increases its complexity by many orders of magnitude, and that's a good thing. Number three, passwords cannot contain words found in common dictionaries. Commonly, attackers will actually use something called a dictionary file to guess passwords, where they literally load a file containing the contents of Webster's dictionary and just start going to town. Let's prevent that from working. Number four, passwords cannot contain either your Access ID or your birth date. This is a ripe attack for social engineering, so let's not use these things. And finally, passwords have to change once every 6 months, and you can't just cheat and set it back to the same one that you just used. That's not any fair. So, given all these sometimes terrible restrictions, what are some things that you can do to manage this mess? Well, I did promise some a few moments ago, so here goes. First, you can use a software program to help you manage your passwords. I recommend one called KeePass. It creates a small, encrypted file on your local desktop, and it keeps all of your passwords easily organized in one place. You can actually then use one master password to access all of them. And here's a good example of the program. Now, over here on the left-hand side, you can actually end up organizing your passwords for different areas. So if you have different servers or systems or external things that you need your passwords for, you can easily keep them organized all in one place. Now, when you need to know a password, all you have to do is over here on the right-hand side for any individual entry, just right-click on it, and you get an option to be able to copy a password. Just go ahead and click on that, and it'll copy that password right into your computer's memory, and then you can just paste that in whatever form or whatever field you want it to be in. No muss, no fuss. This program is free, and because anyone can look at the open source software code behind it, it has been verified as secure, with no malware or hanky-panky going on in the background. There are many other options available, including some that actually stores your passwords up in the cloud, but I trust this one the most. Secondly, if possible, what you can do to help keep your passwords safe is create what's known as a password scheme, some sort of password that you could easily pattern that you could easily remember between systems. So what you end up doing is you create a little bit of a base word or phrase. Here I use the word chopsticks, using some capital letters, some numbers, and some special punctuation. What you can then do is either prepend or append different things to this base word depending what I'm logging into. So for example, for my power company bill, I can add in zap at the end and change it to chopsticks zap. Or maybe for my Apple ID, I change it to iChopsticks. Now when it comes time for me to change my password, I can just swap out this base word in the middle of it all and stick with the same overall scheme. Just make sure that you don't make it too easy for somebody else to figure out. So now that you've learned about your AccessID password, along with some of the things that you can do to help keep attackers out, this topic wouldn't be complete without some reminders on the things that you should never do with your passwords, even if you're using password managers or the scheme that I'm just talking about. First, never share your password with anyone, including managers, coworkers, administrative assistants, system administrators, family members, friends, employees of the help desk, or heck, even me. Never talk about your passwords in front of others. Never reveal your password on questionnaires, surveys, or emails. Never write down your passwords and store them on your computer, either on little sticky notes or little index cards maybe in your desk. Just don't do that. Never save passwords in web browsers or computer programs. Instead, type it in or paste it in from your password manager every time you need to use it. And finally, never reuse a password between systems. It's frustrating and seems a little bit counterintuitive, but let me give you a good example why. Back in 2012, a large breach occurred at a small, insignificant organization called LinkedIn. And I know none of us have ever made an account there, right? And when I'm talking about large breach, I'm talking about the account details of 6.5 million accounts, including passwords. Now, although these passwords were encrypted, LinkedIn did a terrible job at encrypting them, so it was trivial to crack and translate them back into the actual plain text passwords users would type in every day. Now, armed with this information, attackers can do great amounts of damage if a person were to reuse the same password. Now that they know that there's a Kevin Hayes in the Metro Detroit area, and they know my password to boot, they try to access things like utilities and local banks using my username and password to see if anything would let them in. All right, so to wrap up this enthralling topic of passwords, let me recap you the key points. First, passwords are a problem, and we know it. CNIT is listening, and we're evaluating certain technologies which might make dealing passwords easier with in the future. Your AccessID is the gateway into all of your data, so protect it like you would anything else precious. You can use either password managers or password schemes to make the challenge of keeping tabs on all of your passwords much more manageable. The strong password standards are designed to keep your password from being guessed or brute forced. And in short, never, never, never share your password with anyone. Did I mention never? Because I mean never. If you're ever uncertain, just remember, never! Okay, the fourth topic I wanted to discuss today is how to identify and protect yourself against fraudulent emails. Now, you may be asking yourself, why all this fuss about email? I mean, email's been around for a long time, right? So we should have figured out how to keep it secured by now, right? Well, not so fast. The numbers today still prove that email attacks are a primary source of all infections, breaches, and compromised accounts. And there's a few reasons why this is the case. Number one, email attacks are virtually free. Any attacker can send out millions of email messages per hour, costing maybe just a few bucks, if anything. Number two, email attacks are simple and easy. There are people with no actual computer skills sending out these attacks by using simple point-and-click interfaces. And number three, email itself is fundamentally insecure. The original email standards came out back in 1982, a time in which the internet was much smaller, much different, and everyone could still trust each other. Add all this up, and it's unfortunately easy to see why malicious email is still such a juicy way for attackers to come after you. There are a couple of terms you may end up hearing about that describe email attacks. Phishing, with a PH, refers to sending emails that the receiver never asked for in hopes of duping the receiver into giving up some data or personal information. Spear phishing takes things up a notch. Attackers will try to personalize the attack just for you, including things like your name, your city, your place of work, or your interests, in order to lull you into believing their emails are legitimate. Finally, whaling is the pinnacle of all email attacks. Phishing messages targeted specifically to the VIPs of an organization, and the attacker's hopes are that the executives have the most valuable information to steal. As I mentioned, email attacks work, and in a big way. Remember that Target breach that I told you about? Guess how it all started. An HVAC contractor for Target fell victim to a phishing attack. The attackers were then able to pivot from the contractor over to the corporate headquarters, and from there into the cash registers, and 70 million breached credit cards. RSA, the makers of those tiny secure key fobs that we see around quite a bit, they fell victim when one of their own employees fell victim to a phishing attack. The secure code that runs those little key fobs got stolen, and as a result, the attackers were then able to access the suppliers to the U.S. Department of Defense. Not good. Finally, email attacks have been successful against our own employees. We had an attack here at Wayne State where employees were fooled into giving up their AccessID and password, and the attackers then logged into Pipeline and diverted their paychecks over to a foreign bank. While payroll was nice enough to issue a second paycheck, I know other institutions that were hit by the same attack that were not that generous, leaving their employees high and dry. A key thing to understand is that in order for these phishing attacks to work, the victim has to actually do something and, in a sense, agree to be phished. Now, this is done either by opening up an attachment to an email message or by clicking on a link inside an email body. Now, if you open up an unknown attachment, that will more than likely run a virus that compromises your computer. If you click on a link inside that phishing email, one of two things can happen. Either you will be redirected to a page where it will ask you to type in your username and password, or it will try to send you a virus or some malware to your computer through your web browser. Want to see something scary? Let's take a look at some of the success rates for each one of these kinds of attacks. In instances where a phishing email made its way all the way up to a victim, 9% of those victims actually opened up that virus attachment. Similarly, 9% of people just typed in their username and password when a phishing email just asked them to. And scariest of all is that in the case where clicking on a link would silently send you a virus, this happened in almost 20% of cases. Can you imagine 20% of campus getting infected at once? I don't want to. Let's take a look at a phishing email that I got recently, and as did quite a few of you from what I can tell. And let's try and identify some of the telltale signs that it's a scam. First, we have a weird sender address, something that I do not recognize. It has a .link at the end of it, and I have no idea what that is. Next, we have the scary and official-looking capital text that tries to grab our attention. I see that they have put my email address in here, trying to personalize it slightly for me and try to get my guard down. They put in some fake date and time details to make it look like it's an urgent problem. And finally, there's that odd URL down there at the bottom again that I have never heard of. Now, all of these things should be small little red flags that pop up in your mind, and you should know to be extra careful before opening up attachments or clicking on links when you're getting these red flags. Even though phishing attacks are serious business, there are easy things that you can do to protect yourself. First and foremost, only click on links or open attachments that are both from people you trust and are things that you're expecting to receive. This is important, as I might be getting something that looks like it's from my boss, but if it's sent at 3 a.m. and it doesn't look like her writing style, I'm not touching that until I can speak with her the next day. You can watch out for bad spelling and grammar, as well as an abundance of capital letters. The majority of phishing attackers do not use English as their mother tongue, so inconsistencies are easier to spot. You can't always rely on this, as eventually attackers will order hooked on phonics and end up getting better. Also important is to not implicitly trust whoever it says in the from field of an email. That name and address can be forged very easily and be rewritten to say it comes from your boss, the president, or the Dalai Lama. Also important is the fact that CNIT will never ask you for your password, especially in emails. If you get a message from someone who purports to be in IT, from CNIT, or from the help desk, but they're asking you for your password, don't. There is absolutely zero reason why you would have to disclose your password to us legitimately. Similarly, if you get a phish stating that your account may be locked soon or that your mailbox is full or nearing its quota, realize that these are very common scams that should be ignored. Knowing all this, if you think that any email is fishy, the resolution is really simple. Just get confirmation through some other means that it's legitimate. Give the person a call or stop by their office if you can. It's better to be safe than sorry. Finally, it's time for another cheesy rhyme. When in doubt, throw it out. Deleted emails can't hurt you. Alright, it's time to learn about a safety trick called hovering, and I'm not talking about public bathrooms. A common trick is for attackers to actually hide the website they want to take you to. Thankfully, it's real easy to get past this charade. In Wayne Connect or any other web-based email system, just take your mouse and hover it over any link that you think may be suspicious. Make sure that you don't click, just hold your mouse there. And after a moment, you should see a little pop-up that describes the URL that you are going to. Make sure to examine that and watch it for any unexpected websites. Here in this example, it's trying to take me to some website that obviously has nothing to do with a Walmart survey. Another safety trick is to know that green is good when it comes to secure websites in your web browser. A lock and a green box or text before your URL shows that your traffic is safely encrypted and it's going to a verified destination. Here's an example from Wayne Connect, as well as from Chase Bank. The lock on both of these shows that encryption is being used to send my traffic, and the green section confirms that I'm actually going to a server verified to belong to Wayne State or Chase. Look for these greens and the sites will be clean. There are strict security checks on these features, so you can feel confident in trusting them. Please check for these when typing in your credentials to websites, and not just for Wayne State systems, for any websites that you end up accessing. If you are ever unsure where an email link wants to send you, just do the safe thing. Don't click on it. Just open up your web browser and type it in manually. Now, if your department wants to send out official messages, I would recommend using our broadcast messaging system for added security. When you send out email messages, they will all be appended with a small security notice that pulls the last 4 digits of a recipient's one-card ID. The idea behind this is that attackers would not know this information. Only Wayne State would. So this feature can be thought of as a security enhancement to ease the minds of whoever you are sending mass messages to. Finally, you can help in the phishing war by helping your fellow warrior. CNIT monitors for new attacks, but your input and experience is invaluable for us. If you are the recipient of a phishing message and are using Wayne Connect, just drag and drop that message over to the left side of the screen on the little area that says WSU Phish Report. This feature will then wrap up that email and all the technical details behind it and forward it over to our security office for review. By getting these, our security office can identify patterns and new phishing attacks even faster. Wrapping up our discussion on fraudulent emails, hopefully you have a better understanding of a few different things. How common email attacks are, even in today's day and age. How many of the common patterns and techniques attackers will use when trying to phish you. How you can verify your email messages and the links inside them for authenticity. And finally, how to report possible new attacks so that CNIT can respond to them quickly. All right, now it's going to time to talk about our fifth topic, how to combat malicious software. So, what exactly is malicious software? Well, in short, malware describes any kind of software that does unwanted or unauthorized things. Put another way, malware is used by attackers to take control of your computer and your data. It's an umbrella term that includes things like viruses, Trojan horses, worms, spyware, and ransomware. We need to keep all of these kinds of malware off your computer. But hey, how bad could malware really be? Nowadays, malware is so sophisticated and complicated that very frequently it's impossible to get rid of without just formatting your entire computer and starting fresh. Malware these days just finds too many nooks and crannies to burrow into to make it impossible to guarantee that we actually get rid of and clean it all. Also, an interesting example of some nasty malware is called CryptoLocker. This stuff it finds all of your files and documents, both on your computer and on any attached servers. It encrypts all of your files, then demands payment of a few $100 before it'll let your files go. We've actually had some occurrences of this malware here at Wayne State. And thankfully, at least in the cases that I know of, we were able to restore those hostage files through some backups, so we didn't have to pay the attackers. As I mentioned earlier, malware is used by attackers to take over your computer and actively steal your data. And this can happen in a variety of ways. We just talked about phishing email attachments, so now that should be no surprise. Malware can also come in through loose USB drives that are just lying around, much like how viruses used to spread on floppy disks ages ago. Malware can be placed on servers by attackers who exploit bad configurations or old versions of software. And scariest of all, malware can be deposited on your computer just from visiting websites, even ones that you trust. So those wonderful USB sticks that we all carry on with us can also be used to spread malware. And a very common tactic is for attackers to load up a whole bunch of these USB sticks with bad things and conveniently drop or forget them in certain areas, hallways, conference rooms, even on the sidewalk. And they're just waiting for somebody to find them, plug them in, and launch the nasty present that's waiting inside. Don't be a victim. If you find an unknown flash drive, have your IT person connect it up to an isolated computer if you want to see what's on it first. Malware can also spread through something that many people would consider traditional hacking. Attackers scouring the internet looking for computers and servers that have known vulnerabilities they can try to exploit. Thankfully, this is also easily fixed simply by keeping your servers patched and updated. Now, one of the nastiest and most common ways for your computer to get infected is what is known as a drive-by attack. And this kind of attack happens when you're just browsing the web. This attack takes advantage of old and unpatched software that we use every day, like Java, Flash, and Adobe Reader for looking at PDF files. These attacks happen silently and in the background, even when you're visiting so-called safe websites. Let me give you a personal example. On my home computer a little while ago, I was just browsing usatoday.com, something I think that we could all agree on seems safe. But in the middle of reading a story, my computer started grinding, my screen went black, and a gigantic fake FBI screen came up on my monitor, taking over the computer and demanding money. Well, it turns out my Java was out of date, and that advertisement on the USA Today webpage was able to load up some malware into my computer. It took a few days for me to completely get rid of too. It really wasn't a pleasant experience. Even in cases where you want to download programs from the internet on purpose, certain websites can make it very confusing. Here is an actual, legitimate example of what you see when you try to download an antivirus program from download.com. This whole page is purposefully designed to trick you into downloading anything other than what you originally wanted. We have something here that says start download, a free download, a click-free download. We have some more download links and buttons. We have some fake links purporting to be the program I'm trying to download. And we have a buy now button because why not? The only legitimate link here is this one. This link alone will let me download my antivirus software. Clicking anywhere else is really like playing Russian roulette. So how can you protect yourself against this malware that can come from so many different places? There are some simple things that you can do. First and foremost, just watch what you click. Use that hovering technique that you learned about back in phishing to watch where you go before you click. Don't visit risky websites. Sites that seem shady or too good to be true usually are for a reason. Don't be afraid to ask your IT support staff to install software for you. Typically, they have known good copies or know how to get them without letting any malware in at the same time. Make sure you keep an antivirus program on your computer so that if something does inadvertently slip through, there is another line of defense that can help stop it. Additionally, make sure that your operating system and your applications are being kept up to date. Good news if you're a DeskTech customer, I know for a fact that this is already happening for you. And other areas around campus may be doing this as well. Check with your IT support staff if you're unsure. Our internet firewall also has some cool functionality where if it detects a known piece of website malware trying to get into campus, it will block it automatically and show you the following screen, allowing yet another layer of protection. Now, while it's more difficult to catch bleeding edge threats, this has been extremely effective so far this year. On average, our firewall is preventing about 300 malware infections from occurring each and every day. And this is protecting everybody, including the students in the residence halls, as well as the general Wi-Fi networking that's available all around campus. Finally, it's important for you to know that if you think your computer may have been infected with malware, that you need to contact your IT support staff as soon as possible. The sooner we can get it contained, the sooner you can get back to work. You really shouldn't feel embarrassed if you think that you need help. Heck, I just told you how I got my own computer infected. If it can happen to me, it can happen to anyone. It really is important, so don't discount it or blow it off. And if you can't reach your regular support staff, please give the CNIT Help Desk a call. They should be able to do some basic triage and help you out until your regular support staff can. All right, concluding our topic of malicious software, I hope your eyes have been opened a little bit as to the kinds of threats that try to attack your computer every single day. We talked about the different types of malware and that it can come from a number of different sources, including USB sticks, emails, and websites. We ran down a list of some of the simple protections you can do to stop the download and spread of malware, as well as reinforce the fact that if your machine is infected, you really need to let someone know as soon as possible. All right, we are almost done, I promise. The last topic for today is learning how to report an IT security incident. I saved the easiest topic of all for last. Because you are all now security wizards, you should be able to identify possible suspicious activity or behavior. When this happens, all you have to do is contact the CNIT help desk, either by telephone or email, and their contact information is listed here. The staff there are trained to gather some basic information, triage the situation, and then forward it over to our IT security staff as appropriate. That's it. All after-hours help desk calls will go to our 24-hour operations center. Now, if they get a call and it ends up that it's a really bad incident, they will find me or wake me, whatever is needed, and that is perfectly fine. It is our job to be responsive, and I would rather be safe than sorry when it comes down to possible IT security incidents. Additionally, more detailed contact information for all of our security staff can be found on our webpage at security.wayne.edu. When our office receives reported incidents, our security staff follow a standard security incident response plan. Now, this is a plan that we've developed that's applicable to any incident and keeps things flowing in the proper direction. No job's too big, no job's too small when it comes to responding to any possible incidents. Any incident that we receive is handled seriously, professionally, and with the appropriate level of confidentiality. We have had situations where people wanted to report something they saw, but also wanted to keep their name out of it. We're able to work around these situations and accommodate many of them. One of our main goals in the security office is to be open, supportive, and to help you perform your business. Our job is not to look at a situation and say no, but instead to figure out how to say yes. If you have any kind of security-related question, need any clarifications, or just want some overall advice, please do not hesitate to contact one of us directly. Shams is our lead security specialist, and both he and myself are more than happy to help make sure you and your daily work is being done securely. All right, we did it! Today, we covered a significant amount of material. However, I believe that each of the 6 topics that we covered provided you with the requisite knowledge and tips to help keep the university a safer place. We started talking about why we need IT security, learning why attackers want our data, and how your help is needed to stop them. We then moved on to talking about how to protect your data by keeping a data inventory, deleting unneeded data, and encrypting the real juicy stuff. Don't forget to lock your computer and your mobile devices. From there, we talked about safeguarding your credentials and your passwords, as they are the ultimate keys to our data. Never share your passwords, and use password managers, naming schemes, and strong passwords to help keep attackers at bay. We looked at how to identify fraudulent emails and how attacks like phishing, unfortunately, are not going away. We learned some of the telltale signs attackers use in phishing messages, as well as how to verify the authenticity of emails and the URL links that they contain. Don't forget to report bad things using the phishing Zimlet. We looked at how to combat malicious software, whether it tries to get in from USB sticks, emails, servers, or websites. Make sure to be careful on what you click and where you browse, and keep your applications and your operating system up to date. Finally, you learn that to report an incident, you just have to call the CNIT help desk, and that our IT security staff are happy to help with your IT security questions and needs. I really want to thank you for attending today's IT Security Awareness session. It means a lot to me, and your support and participation keeps us safe and makes the university a better place for everyone. Feel free to refer back to this training as often as you like, and watch out for job aids and quick reference sheets that cover this material over on the CNIT Security website, security.wayne.edu. Once again, this is Kevin Hayes, CNIT Information Security Officer. Thank you for joining us today.